When born with the XX chromosome as a female, who you become is not just about that XX chromosome. It's not just about your parents. It's about so much more. And the boundless capacity we have to grow into ourselves and truly become our best version of ourselves across cycles, across stages of life. Today, we explore it all. You'll know that if you listen to the podcast live, every month we have amazing low-tox businesses helping you with your swaps or stock-ups. Check out the 2 offers we have below, both for Aussies, with the Edible Beauty offer also being for our US watchers and listeners. Enjoy. Leah, hello.
Hello, nice to be here.
So good to have you back. And you are probably one of 10 guests in my time interviewing over 450 people now that I would say, I don't want to set boundaries. I don't want to make a list. I know that the conversation that needs to be had is going to be had, and I'm just going to start us off.
Thank you for the privilege.
Right?
Love it.
You're brave enough. I know when someone's brave enough, and we're going there. So I'm just going to say XX chromosome.
Yep.
And that is going to start us on a journey to what that means, how it plays out, the miracle of that, and then we will be going anywhere we land.
Here we go. Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Okay. So our caveat, we're talking XX chromosome and we're not offending anyone, and we're looking at people, how they were biologically born, but we are going to reference it as the word woman, female, etc., and being totally respectful to everyone's version of how they see themselves. Let's go deep, yeah? So we conceive children and we have X chromosomes there, which is the predominant chromosome. So everyone's identical until about 8 weeks gestation. Then we have various hormonal things that change and determine which direction we go. So we either go male or female. And like all of us start with original tissues around breasts, all of us start with ovaries, and then they either turn into testes or ovaries, or they develop full breast tissue or not. So either way, we're all starting from the same platform, because the X portion of either XX female or XY male, the X portion is always the strongest. So we all start from the same platform, and then we start to differentiate in utero, essentially. And then early childhood years, there's not a lot of difference for either men or women. Of course, obviously, there's external visible differences and there's all the original imprinting and changes. But then it's really at puberty where we start to sort of change our brains quite distinctly. We start to change our physiology quite distinctly, and we start to develop all our sexual characteristics and all those sorts of aspects. But the brain part's the really fascinating part. They think at this point, that when we're born, the XX versus the XY are born with different brains from the get-go, but it's the puberty initiation that really changes that development of the brain, which then changes who we are, what we are, and everything about us.
Wow. Okay. And so what is happening to the young woman going through puberty that we need to know helps us either understand that time better? I've chatted with girlfriends who've got girls. I'm a boy parent. And I find it amazing how much hormones impact the human experience and our biological roles, and then through culture and religious construct and whatever else we want to layer on top of that, our cultural, societal roles. But we see through time and history that a lot of people have hit puberty and become young women and had really strong reactions to all the extra layers that got built on top that forced us to act a certain way. And I would be so keen to hear your thoughts on why. Is there a biochemical reason that some of us are very happy to go with the flow of social construct versus...
Ooh, you'll go there.
I know. I told you it was going to go.
That's okay. No. We're going.
Versus the people who go, this isn't right, and I want to be who I am.
Okay, so let's look at it through the biological lens. So we've
Mm.
got the biology of a female entering puberty to evolve her into her womanhood, yeah? So she's having her brain change quite dramatically. A number of different sections are changing and evolving. Certain parts of her brain are expanding to essentially make her the attributes that we associate with being female, i.e., being caring, being sensitive, thinking of other people, worrying about other people. All of those parts of her brain are maturing in that period. Yeah.
Mm.
And then you've got her genetics around hormone sensitivity of those parts of her brain, but equally hormone receptors right through her entire being. And some of us are biologically wired to have more estrogen receptors than other women, and those with higher estrogen receptors that you usually more, and please, this is not a judgy thing, but it's usually people with higher estrogen are usually more caring and more externally concerned, whether or not that pushes them into service or whether or not that pushes them into fighting for others and supporting others and doing things for others. It often will correlate with hormone basis. And, you know, there's contention around this because it gets tricky and people get offended and there's all those sorts of things. But your biology, from a fundamental fact of being an XX chromosome, is one part. And then you've got your genetics around your hormone levels and tendencies towards hormone patterns. And then that will evolve it.
Mm-hmm. And if you look at nature, robustness in a species is because of constant weak genetic culling. You know,
Yep.
the best of
Yep.
the best keep rising to the top. And I
Yep.
often wonder whether we've almost outsmarted ourselves by being able to save. And this is no judgment. Like if my boy had been born at 24 weeks, you bet I would have been doing absolutely everything possible to keep him alive and, you know, have him turn into the baby boy I so desperately wanted. It's not a judgment. But I often wonder whether in nature it exists that there are these interesting genetic variants that that actually serve. You know,
Humanity.
if you look at an organization, I could tell you after a brief interview who the HR people are, who the
Mm.
customer service people are, who the
Mm-hmm.
marketing crew are. Like you know the
Yep.
personality types,
Yep.
and
100%.
so is what you're saying there that we actually have these varieties of varying degrees of estrogen receptors, and could that actually serve a
Yes.
purpose for roles
Yes.
in
Yes.
society?
Yes. 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 And so when
Wow.
you look at, like, there's some studies that have been done that look at people with development of diseases. So, for example, women with PCOS, there is one theory which is the metabolic type of PCOS woman generally carries extra weight, and when she loses weight, she ovulates to continue. So that we have a subset species of individuals that, when they're at a lower body mass, they'll continue to be able to procreate when everybody else is starving. So they have higher androgen receptors, which keep the body weight on them. But equally, I think that there's a lot to be said that, and again, it's not being judgy on anyone, but you can look at the subtypes of women with various PCOS subtypes, and the woman with the metabolic subtype will correlate with an emotional picture, which will then correlate with choices around occupation, which will correlate with personality traits that determine how she interacts and engages with her world. And you see that time and time again. It's not that every disease is in her head, it's just that the marrying, for want of a better word, the marrying of her hormone makeup and disease manifestation or phenotype of it all will correlate with personalities. Just how it
Hmm.
works. And we know that each of the individual hormones will affect our emotional bandwidth. You ask any woman at different intervals of her cycle, she will have differences in who she is and how she interacts and engages with the world. And certain women with certain tendencies towards higher levels, i.e., the PCOS woman with high androgens, will often be in a more driven occupation or have passions that are more driven because of the excess androgens and the reduced estrogen, versus the woman with high estrogens may often be attracted to a more service oriented role that's very caring and nurturing and different things along those lines.
Wow. So I'm picturing myself, the higher androgen chick with the more metabolic type in the wild,
Mm.
who is driven and therefore helping us find that freaking food
Yep.
because
Essential.
everyone else is starving.
Yep.
And in the process of doing that, I also probably lose some weight.
Yep.
I find the food,
Yeah.
androgens go down. Estrogen comes up because I've sorted out my metabolic issue by doing all that hunting.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden I can take on a caring role and ovulate again and possibly have kids again. Plus I've had all those nutrients that make that safe to do so because we've got the food.
Yep. Yep.
Wow.
Yeah. And we do that though, I think in our current system of society where most of us are in desk jobs and things like that, we're losing our understanding of what that specific hormone type could actually offer us and how it could contribute to society. So I think it's about discovering that. And when you are getting information around a particular lab value or a disease state or whatever it is, trying to understand what's underneath it can then give you insight into what would remedy it. And so that's why for the PCOS woman, she is exercising and she is using those androgens to her advantage. But equally, the flip of it is the high androgen woman that isn't expressing it will often have a very scarred ovary and the follicles can't come out and she's very silenced inside and she can do a lot of that emotional processing, which will then ease a lot of the ovarian burden and then sort of translate it too. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that was the first 10 minutes of nice light start there. We
dive. Let's just dive.
There's no pussyfooting.
Whatever.
We're on the 10-meter dive board at the local pool right now, and we're just going right in. Okay, and so when it comes to then working on our issues, let's call it disease presentations, metabolic issues, we look at testing and we look at, then there's the like 500 supplements you seem to be like prescribed, and then there's the medications maybe even, and there's so many granular mechanical kind of pieces of work that come into the health picture, both holistically and conventionally, I might add. I always kind of use the taxi driver metaphor. There's like people who know the way and there's people who follow the map. And I think we need to do more of the know the way than follow the map, because what you've just illustrated there is that there is just so much more to. Once we have hormones online and the many factors due to modern medicine, modern life, genetics, lifestyle, environmental stresses, all the things that can throw us out of kilter, age stage, when we work on our hormones, what is, in your vision, the best holistic practice of doing that?
Oh, that's such a big question.
I know. So welcome to our 3-day seminar, everybody. We're going to be taking some regular breaks. Get out your notepads.
Here's your toilet pad. No, I do want to say that one of the most fascinating populations that I work with, so the groups of women that I get to work with, are the women that are perimenopausal and menopausal. And the phrase that I always say to them is, the gift of this stage, if they're choosing to use hormones, bioidenticals, they get to choose who they want to be. And they can change who they want to be day to day, circumstance to circumstance. So I think we have to remember that the hormones are very flexible when used through an empowerment lens. So then when we flip it to the other end and we look at what that means and how it all works, but a menopausal woman is not limited to, I have to take this amount of estrogen every day for the rest of my life because I want to be static. Because part of the beauty of the XX chromosomes environment is that we are used to cycles. And so we naturally have an inclination to cycles, often governed by the moon and governed by circumstance and season and things like that. But, I'll always say to my women, I'm like, go and have a weekend with your partner and have some extra testosterone. The worst thing that's going to happen is you're just going to have a really high libido. Like, what's the worst thing that's going to happen?
Shocker. Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So it's kind of like, it's this idea of when you have that like pre-puberty age, obviously they're not on hormones and they need to be based so that they can start to develop their brain, particularly their amygdala, so that they become decent humans. But in the reproductive years, we're going and we're changing and we're doing. And then when we're on that other end of it, we don't have to be static. And I think that's a lot of the challenge for a lot of women as they go from here to here. They go, well, I like the changeability and the movement and the flow of myself. So then I like the ability to have some change in this phase. And you're not having huge changes, but some. Because I think that, if we go back to the beginning, and I will get to your question, if we go back to the beginning, you know, like a woman with PCOS, she's used to having a particular state, but she's got a bandwidth of where she has come and goes to. Putting her in here, she feels quite locked down. And that's so much the experience, I think, of women where they just feel very, very like just contained. And some people like that, and some people don't like that.
Like, why would we prevent that person from feeling like they feel more themselves with some hormones on board? It's fascinating to me how we're so hell-bent on judging how it should look for everybody, which is just, I feel like that's what has got us into this global mess in the first place.
I actually find it quite, like, I think one of the cautionary things that I find is that by introducing bioidentical hormones to women, and I hope you don't mind that we're here for a bit, but
No,
by
no.
introducing bioidentical hormones to women, they're not their endogenous production. So they're not exact, they are identical, but they're not exactly their body. And we don't really know exactly what we're giving them. And are we creating women that are all of the same frequency and the same pitch and the sameness from those hormones, but also from the doses? Like, are we creating a generation of women that are all on this 100 milligrams of bioidentical progesterone every day? Does that then remove the individualization of women? Does it remove some of their variations of, could they be the hunter that was going to go and get the food? Like, all of those things, we're in this stage, we're going to watch it all unravel. We don't know. We don't know. But there's so much of who we are is based on those hormones. So it has to be that it will be like that.
And so what do you think the empowerment message is for people to feel like they can really own a sense of choice on a journey like that?
I think the big thing is around hormones, is first making a decision if it's something that you want to do or not want to do. And if you don't want to do it, it's your body, it's your journey, it's your choice. I think that we should be taking them because we're going to be living longer and, you know, all of those reasons. But for her to have empowerment around that decision, it's about, firstly, in like your situation, you like a certain amount of hormones and allowing you to have the choice of it, allowing women to have the flexibility of recognizing different stages in their life will warrant different doses. Different seasons of the year may also warrant different doses. We're all much more hibernating in winter. We may all want more progesterone in winter. There's a logical part to that. We want deeper quality sleep, et cetera, et cetera. But also looking at it in the context, obviously working with a clinician, but looking at it in the context of, if you've had a big tragedy, you know, you've had a big loss of whatever type of loss, your brain needs more progesterone. Do you have the capacity to generate it yourself from a brain production perspective and an adrenal production perspective? Or if giving you some extra, would that be of benefit and of service to you? And so I think the empowerment is about knowing your body. If you are taking the hormones, trialing them, seeing how that makes you feel. And if you feel quite foreign from who you know yourself to be, then working with someone to identify, is it dose, is it timing, is it season, is it whatever, and working out how that works for you. But the formulaic approach, we do run the risk of creating lots of many women being identical, like when we had lots of women on the first gen of the pill. And all of those women were quite similar. And then if we go really deep into some of more your areas of your history, you know, like all those women in the 60s and the 70s, and there was a group of them that were on the contraceptive pill. And if you really start looking at their political leanings, their opinions, their considerations around their positions as women, we were creating a type of woman. Are we then going to be running the risk of doing the same on this end? Don't know. Possibly, though.
Wow.
Yeah.
Are we creating a type of
Type
woman?
of woman. And that's, I think,
Fascinating.
that's some of the considerations that some of the non-hormone women have. They're like, I would still want to have agency over my body. I still want this, et cetera, et cetera. And the argument to hormone or not to hormone, i.e. to take it or not to take it, is the idea of, well, is the body designed to be able to survive without hormones? And we've got all this information that says, well, a woman without estrogen, you know, longevity forecasts and bone health forecasts and all this sort of stuff. So there is a need for it. But then who are we turning these women into? And because the average lifespan of a Gen X woman now is expected to be 100 years of age plus. So then she's got potentially 50, 60 years of being a curated woman.
How do we stop that from becoming a patriarchal decision, given the way politics often plays out still with the boys' clubs and privatizations, and then we let our buddies get the contracts and like all that jazz?
Yep.
How can we lead a female-led empowerment movement around that and what it looks like? Because I feel like it can just easily get caught up in government or still very male-dominated science and medical
Drug companies and all
associations.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm certainly not an expert in this, but I
Mm,
think that we've got a lot of incredible women around the world who are all rallying together because we know as women that just the X chromosome, that extra X chromosome, we know that that type of generation of woman, she does do better when she works with other women. She does have more collegiality, more bonding, more sisterhood, more, and there's a lot of women that sort of talk about it, that when they realize in that time of their life that their connection to their female friends is so much deeper and more meaningful than their connection to males for 101 reasons. Um, I think it's important that my thinking around it is that the current women that are driving it will drive it to the place where in Australia, for example, we have access to these hormones on the PBS. So accessibility is improved, information delivery is improved, those sorts of things. But I do think that the next aspect of it is about women allowing themselves to be women with total agency over themselves and taking the power around the decision away from wherever they can. So the decisions are obviously around safety, first and foremost, if it's a medical decision. Um, but the education that women are getting at the moment, their level of education is phenomenal. I
mm,
mean, any woman that I work with nowadays knows almost as much as me. And the only reason I know a little bit more in some things is because that's what I'm focusing on.
mm,
She understands it. She wants to get the level of information that I know to be shared. Um, Women understand what they want. I think it's about now educating women around the idea of not only can you not have a horrendous menopause and then silence yourself in the corner, you can also choose to change that story, but now you can also choose to stay who you are and stay in your integrity of who you are and make decisions around what you bring into your life, i.e., hormones or other, to be able
mm.
to create the version of you and change that version of you as much as you will want to.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? I happened to see a clip online where Stephen Bartlett, who's a great interviewer, was interviewing
Awesome.
Sarah Gottfried. I can't remember her new surname.
Selves.
Apologies. Yes, thank you. Around menopause and divorce.
Yeah.
And I think it is actually a unique opportunity as estrogen starts to drop to do a bit of a big reveal on
Mm,
some of the things that you shoulder
yep.
that if you didn't have the protection of that estrogen creating the environment for you to be able to shoulder so much,
Mm,
everything from people's traits, the way they treat you, or even just mental load or whatever,
mm,
I don't think that's a necessarily awful thing for a woman to experience before she starts making choices about hormones and replacing levels. Because I think it's actually a fascinating window. I have learned so much about
mm,
myself as my estrogen has declined. Like,
mm,
wow, I was
mm,
just okay with that. And I think
mm,
there's something really healthy about some of that's not about my marriage, actually, just to
mm,
just to say that in case hubby's listening. It's actually about a number of things. I think just a general sense around shouldering and
yep.
mental load and
Yep.
it
Yep.
being actually very useful to freedom for women to
Yeah.
go through this menopausal stage. Well, I'm not menopausal yet, but the lead up even
Yep.
to advocate and to do more work around human rights in that phase.
Yeah. It's a tricky one because human rights requires so much energy from the woman, and she's
And
often
that
trying
usually
to pull
is
back.
estrogen.
Yeah,
Yes.
and she's trying to pull back at that point. So a woman in her 40s, we assume it's perimenopausal. She's trying to pull back and prioritize, but maybe it's through the arm of prioritization and coming back to her values and going, I've given and given and given. Now my values are actually around this human rights issue, or my values are around freedom of speech, or whatever it is. And she can channel it there, but there's so much empowerment through all of it. It's just recognizing that really this generation of women have more choices than ever before. So using the change in estrogen to actually free up choices.
Nice.
Yeah.
Whew. Change in estrogen to free up choices. And so is that why, and we kind of joked about this before we hit record, but is that why this period in life feels like you can want to change the world and be outraged and be exhausted and just want to have a cup of tea and a swim at the beach, but in perpetuity? I feel like I've never had a point in my life where I didn't know which one of those I wanted to choose, because I feel like I now live in a reality where I want them all the time.
It's the biggest transformative part of our brain than at any other point in our life. And we don't have the capacity to comprehend the brain changes when we're between 1 and 2. And then the puberty brain changes, we get to sleep for 14 hours.
Yes.
Like every time the puberty kid has, those sleep-ins till 12 in the afternoon, I'm like, bring it, because their LH and their FSH is surging. And so their brain is like, sleep, rest, sleep, rest, sleep, rest. And then on the other end of it, it's like, sleep, rest, sleep, rest. No, I've got to do this, 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 this. But it's the language I always use with my patients is you have this amazing opportunity to go from this brain to this brain, and you get to choose what you want to bring with you. And you get to prune or you get to cut off. And then every past experience, trauma, memory, whatever comes up, and you go, yeah, that's not me anymore, or I'm going to go deal with that, or, oh my God, I'm outraged. And then you get to work out who you want to be on the other end. But it's very much about self-creation. Yeah, as long as we choose it. But the rest part of it is, it's a different life thing, but it's identical to puberty. That's why Lara always talks about it as second puberty, which I love.
I know. It's fabulous. And I like Carrie Jones's reverse puberty metaphor as well, because it's just what? We're going through this crazy stuff again? So rest, though, that has come up, and everyone talks about how important it is.
Absolutely.
And everyone talks about how if you're getting your sleep, you're going to find perimenopause a lot less intense. However, the cruel irony is that it seems that in that period of life, it is impossible, and I can show you my Oura Ring stats to back this up, that all of a sudden my HRV has plummeted. All of a sudden my heart rate's gone up 5 beats a minute overnight. All of a sudden I wake up with a swath of like a little mini ocean on my forehead sometimes and on my chest, and just thinking, oh, okay, right. So I'm awake now. Okay, that was 4.5 hours. Oh, okay. No amount of box breathing, no amount of glycinate, no amount of melatonin, no amount of anything other than at least progesterone taking away the anxious peaks, which is lovely. And I am very grateful for that. What do we do here, Leah? Can you give us some, we've just talked about the magic, the opportunities, the importance of freedom of choice. There is also the reality of living through the practicality of these bizarre sleep changes that are so frustrating if we are trying to make the most of this wonderful synaptic pruning, and what will we take and what will we not. I don't want to go shopping sometimes. I just want sleep. I don't want to think about it all. I just want 8 hours sleep. What do we do?
There's 3 lenses, all right? So we're going to go through all 3. So
excellent.
Separate from your experience.
Oh, yes. No, this is not about me.
No, I know that. No, I know that. But separate from your sensitivity to progesterone, and we can talk about that later if you want to, because there's lenses to that. Progesterone is the hormone of neuroplasticity. And so as women are transitioning through this period, if they don't have enough progesterone, their brain isn't repairing itself very well. So generally with women, you give them the amount of progesterone that they need, or progesterone precursors, or homeopathics, or whichever way they want to do it. But progesterone is the hormone to actually calm the brain to be able to induce sleep properly. And I mimic cycles with doses for women, and I do all sorts of interesting things. But progesterone is the neuroplastic hormone. And remember, I'm sure I've said it with you before, and I'm going to swear, I'm sorry. It's the slut of the hormone world, because it goes everywhere. So if you have a difficult day, or you do eat the popcorn before you go to sleep, wherever your other hormones are needed, progesterone goes and sacrifices itself to try to help. So progesterone is in its greatest need in this time of life, and we need a lot of it. And the thing that I always remember with progesterone is it is the balm, you know, it is that soothing balm to our brain, our nerves, our neurons. It's how our nervous system adapts and adjusts and reformates and all those sorts of things. And getting the right amount of it and the uptake of it is really crucial.
Oh, can you talk amount and uptake? Uptake's an interesting word that you've added
Yeah,
there.
yeah, for sure. So we've got the balancing act. So amount of it, if we look at it, if we're say talking bioidentical hormones, you know, the typical PBS dose or typical AMA dose, menopause society dose is 100 milligrams every day, and it starts with luteal phase only, and then it goes to every night. But I have some women, you know, like I've got one beautiful woman, and we work together, and she has no progesterone in her follicular phase, not her follicular phase, sorry, her period, but in her follicular phase, her pre-ovulatory phase, we give her 25 to 50 milligrams, depending on where she's at in life. And then we give her 100 after she's ovulated and 200 before her period, so that she has this natural inclination of
So
improvement.
literally following the curve that you see
Following
on
the
any
curve.
chart of hormone
Following
health
the
over
curve.
yeah, okay.
But a lot of women don't get before ovulation because everyone's like, oh my God, you can't get progesterone before ovulation. But I've got countless papers that show that you need progesterone to tell the other hormones to actually ovulate. And so because the idea of the signaling from the egg to the brain to ovulate gets all skewed, you know, it's not working so well, then the progesterone doesn't kick off from the brain. So let me backtrack. So before we ovulate, LH has to go up. So luteinizing hormone has to go up. And because that's released by the brain, it gets the brain's production of progesterone to get that LH out. They couple together and then they go and they release the egg out. And some women, their brain production of progesterone is off doing other things. So they don't actually get that ovulation initiation, no ovulation, then no progesterone. And before they're perimenopausal, they'll ovulate some months, won't the other months, all that sort of stuff. And the thing I always say to everybody is if you ovulate well in 1 month, it then sets you up for the next 3 months having an egg that has better maturation because of the progesterone it was exposed to. Yeah. So then you've got 3 months where things should be nice and stable for sleep, and you should be able to produce enough progesterone. But perimenopause, some months you ovulate, some months you don't. So then if you're giving progesterone, you try and mimic the cycle, or at least you try and fill back the progesterone so that the month after that egg is better quality and has a better chance of producing its own as well. Does that make sense?
It does. And what you said about the brain there, coming back to what we were talking about just a little earlier with the popcorn mention, if progesterone is a rescuer and we live in modern, stressed, pushed lives, maybe throw in a bit of mold exposure, a few EMFs, and all, you know, all that jazz, and a couple of drinks with the gals on a Friday night. That could well be why a lot of people are finding themselves not ovulating properly, because the progesterone's spread too thin, literally. Is that right?
Literally. It's part of it. And the kicker is that paper that came out in Fertility and Sterility 2 weeks ago. And my heart just fell because it was like they did a study and they looked at women. And guess what? If you don't sleep enough, you don't ovulate and you can go through menopause earlier. And I'm like, that's just stuffed because all these women don't have enough progesterone. So, of course, they're not sleeping well. So then it's just a vicious cycle and it's self-fulfilling. But progesterone will sacrifice itself. So your thyroid goes into overdrive. It takes progesterone to help it. You go and the alcohol, your liver needs a bit of extra support. You're more stressed. Your cortisol needs support. Progesterone goes everywhere. And when a person goes through trauma, that was that other few papers on this, physical trauma and emotional trauma, the brain increases its production of progesterone. So then if a woman is going through the trials and tribulations of processing who am I in the world at this age, not sleeping, eating popcorn, then, do you know what I mean? Like it's just a vicious cycle. It just keeps going round and round and round. So you just give progesterone and it just resets everything. But the uptake part is about progesterone receptor uptake. And that's nutritional, it's environmental, it's, you know, based on estrogen uptake as well. But there's lots of different things that you can do with it. Don't know if you want me to go into that or not.
Yeah, go for it. Happy for you to. I feel like we're still on number one of the three things
only on
you're going
one,
to
and
talk
there's
about.
three.
Yeah.
And I literally put 3 fingers on the table so I remember that there are 3.
Don't worry. I was like, I've got to remember she said 3.
I'm trying to remember the third right now, but it will come back to me. We're all good. Progesterone uptake is obviously influenced by stress and all those other things and dietary choices, lifestyle choices, whatever. But the receptors themselves can be damaged by infection. They can be damaged by microbial species, but also disruption to the gut microbiome. And uptake is heavily influenced by estrogen recirculation. So, you know, that classic woman where she's just recirculating toxic forms of estrogen, then she's obviously then going to have damage to the receptors too. But it's fascinating when you get the confluence, fascinating to me, you get the confluence of hormonal patterning and metabolic uptake and changeability, but then you also get the psychology. So that brain that's evolving from, you know, reproductive years to menopausal years is dumping traumas and dumping memories, which requires an enormous amount of progesterone receptor activity and also progesterone production to be able to tolerate and process it. So you've got the fluctuation of how that's all changing, which kind of leads me to the second one if you want to go there now.
I do, but I just want to ask something because
go.
like it feels like what a cruel biological joke that we're supposed to be doing all of this pruning and sorting and dumping of traumas and yada yada that require a lot more progesterone right when it's starting to
or
tank.
It's an opportunity.
Okay.
Or it's an opportunity. So absolutely, it's a cruel joke. So if you're the woman that's listening to this and you're at home and you're like, I don't know myself anymore, and some months I'm having heavy periods and some months I am just bawling my eyes out and I can't sleep and I'm having sweats and I just feel awful, that's not an opportunity. That's just torture. Yeah. And then you throw some life stressors on there, and maybe there's a divorce, and maybe there's financial distress and mold in the house, and you know, it's a cluster. That's just torture. But the opportunity is that, and the lens that I always want women to lean into if they can, is it's an upgrade period. It's a time to transform into a new version of yourself. And it's an opportunity that if you get the resources and the support, you can transition through it. Whilst it's challenging, it's phenomenally empowering. Like personally, and I'm not postmenopause yet, but personally, I've done EMDR the whole way through perimenopause. And I timed it without knowing what I was doing, but I've timed it in a way that it sounds crass, but it's magical because I'm intentionally choosing the brain that I'm creating. I'm intentionally choosing the restructure of my brain, and I'm using progesterone, both nutritionally supporting it, herbally supporting it, progesterone bioidentically, homeopathically, whatever. And I'm using it to restructure the type of brain that I want, which means I'm intentionally creating the person that I'm turning into without feeling like I'm beholden to the process. And I think that's the way we have to look at it.
It is the way we have to look at it. I would totally agree. How do we not make it a privilege?
In the sense of a privilege of only that some can afford it privilege, or yeah. So then it's about recognizing that this is happening and being an active observer and an active participant in it. And it doesn't cost anything to journal at home. It doesn't cost anything to be tracking your symptoms and to be aware of these changes are correlated with this experience and those sorts of things. But every woman that is in a perimenopausal transition will be having intentional dreams where her subconscious is dumping things and telling her, I want to process this. Hopefully they have the resources to be able to have some support to process it. Worst case scenario, Lifeline, Relationships Australia, someone to talk to, because every woman is having flashbacks of experiences and traumas and different things. And every woman is trying to navigate who that makes her now. And is that a part of her personality that she needs to resolve, she needs to forgive, or she needs to transform?
The medicine of friendship as well, real
100%.
friendship.
And that's where I think our female friends are so important, because we are all in this experience together if we're of similar ages, and we get it, you know, and we understand it and we're compassionate around it. And absolutely, your friends are like pure medicine.
And you mentioned nutrition. What are some of the most supportive things we can be doing in terms of, if we're grocery shopping and we're going to eat anyway, where do we focus?
We focus on stabilizing our blood sugars, number one. So whether or not that is some timed eating patterns, so that you're not eating popcorn, not you necessarily, but you're not eating popcorn at 11 o'clock at night.
Popcorn's like evil
I love
substance.
Popcorn. It's got nothing to do with popcorn itself. We'll call it potato chips, whatever it is. But it's, you know, you're not eating carbohydrates at 11, 12 o'clock at night when you're doom scrolling or any of the other things my patients tell me. They're like, I know I need to be in bed, but I'm there and I'm doom scrolling or I'm watching some crappy show. What am I doing? Why am I doing this? And then I'm eating because I'm awake. And, you know, and it's the vicious cycle. So the food choices and the timing around when we eat, I think, is important. more so than actually what is on the end of your fork. It's around when and why. And even if it's just a 12-12 model, that there's no food that passes your lips after 7 o'clock at night, straight away, you're making a dramatic change. Because if we go to the progesterone thing, if you're eating at 11 o'clock at night, your progesterone is off helping the liver through the whole night. And you're having all of these liver overload aspects that are affecting your ability to produce a hormone for the next day, let alone your ability to digest and process it all. So it's just the respect of your body and the gentleness.
So night eating makes you
Less hormones.
And it
Yeah,
basically turns your progesterone into the overnight janitor.
pretty much. Yeah,
Instead of the lovey-dovey, I'll look after you, let's just have
the
some good
support.
rest now, sweetheart.
And instead of healing your brain as you sleep.
Clean up instead of heal up. We want the heal up.
Yeah.
So stop eating at night.
Yeah, I mean, progesterone regulates the lymphatic system of the brain, which is the lymphatic cleaning process.
Well, that is
of the
a
brain
great
while we
cleanup.
sleep.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
and you want that cleanup versus I mean, your liver will do its own thing, but it shouldn't steal the progesterone to do it.
That is so powerful, because I often find, I didn't personally know that. I did know that I just should not eat at night, and I know it feels awful if I do. But a lot of people struggle with the don't eat 3 hours because you haven't had the truly important explanation as to exactly why and how it plays out if you do. So I feel like that in itself was just such a great gift. Thank you for breaking it down.
Yes, of course. I think we all know, the idea of giving your gut a break before you sleep, and there is that part to it. But if you're trying to conserve progesterone in particular, yeah, quite powerful.
Yeah, what a way to motivate the perimenopausal woman to stop eting after dinner. Okay, I'm sold. Yeah,
I'm done.
So number two.
One of the authors that I love Martha Beck. I don't know if you know Martha Beck. Yeah, and I love her work. I love her work, and I find her just so beautiful. And one of the things that she wrote, I think in one of her books it was, I can't remember, and she talks about the opposite of all of the, if we sort of come back to that idea of where society's at and the masculinization of society and all that sort of stuff. The most important thing she recommends is the idea of rest. And it is the thing that all women struggle with. But it is the idea that to equalize society, from her perspective, which I wholeheartedly agree with, to equalize society. But even if you look at your microcosm of your family and just your infrastructure, and we all know that the family where the mother is just stretched, everyone is stressed. And then the mother that goes, I'm going to bed, it's 9 o'clock, and she goes and she has her 8-9 hours of sleep, and she's rested, and she exercises in the morning, and she's nourished. She has more love to give, and the whole family feels better. But if you take that on a more macro perspective, some of this is around women really honoring the power of rest and how that will actually do so much more for the collective than pushing and fighting. And perhaps the instincts around rest are actually to transform society.
Wow, that has brought up, I mean, yeah,
it's triggering.
Yeah, it is triggering. And I've even read Martha's work and seen her speak about that. But for some reason, that has landed quite powerfully into a direction where my mind then thinks the disempowerment a lot of young men are feeling, and that kind of searching that a lot of young men and men are doing. What does it all mean, and where do I fit? And does that mean if they get to do whatever they want, but like, isn't that going to take things away from me? And then it becomes a power struggle, and it doesn't need to happen at all if we realize we need to rest more and they need to actually just act more.
And it's where we thrive. It's that dropping into the feminine. And I remember it took me years to accept it, and I remember looking at it going, oh God, that's just all rubbish. Of course, yes, whatever. But really, anyone that has children, they know that it is the mother that determines the home. It is the mother that determines the ability for our male sons to be able to feel like they can act, because they have that base at home, and they have that rested, nourished mother that has more to give. Her estrogen is more robust, etc. If we go back to the hormone part of it. But there's so much of it that I think we really need to lean into, and we really need to allow, and we really need to allow ourselves to do. with the second, I think it's about the enjoyment of rest and recognizing the productivity of rest and the
Mm.
ripple effect of the productivity of it, even though we feel as though we're not productive.
Mhm.
But I was coming originally, correct me if I'm wrong, that we were talking about it from the brain changes itself. Um, I think it's very much around the intentionality around choice, because I did cover it. My third thing was more around the choices, around things like EMDR and brain changes. And this is why a lot of people are like, do I do psychedelics? Do I do EMDR? Do I become a shaman? Like that sort of stuff. But it's very much around the agency of choice in this, to be proactive about it, and rather than suppressive, rather than reactive about it. And that the ability to sleep and the ability to rest is about the consciousness of the choice that we make to it. So, because I knew I'd blended them, so I apologize, because we
Okay.
kind
No,
of
no,
had some
all good.
directions with it. Because so many women, where they are lying there, because in my brain I can see you there with your progesterone deficient lack of sleep in that moment, and the progesterone is one part of it. But there's so much creativity that's discovered in women in this period as well. And I
Mm.
think that they don't necessarily explore it the way that they can, but it's really, it's a consciousness. And so let's say I take 10 women that I'm working with, and 10 women, 5 of them choose to go and do EMDR or something similar. 3 of them choose to do psychedelics, and 2 of them choose to not do anything. They theoretically could all get to the same place. The active EMDR people, or the active people that are doing intentional, I want to reconfigure my brain approach, those sorts of people are literally saying, enough is enough. I want to be a different person. I'm going to change who I am. I'm going to change where I'm going. The
Mm.
3 people that are choosing psychedelics may lean into that, or they may just have a really good experience for one day and then that's all they want to do. Or they will use psychedelics in a really shamanistic, medicinal way, and it will be a journey of discovery and reclamation. And the 2 people that don't often have a very hard time of the process, may
Mm.
entertain using antidepressants, may entertain antidepressant herbs even, may just feel quite overwhelmed by the experience, and they often shut themselves out of life more. The other 2 arms, they tend to still engage more, and they still sort of put more into their life, and they seem to want to have the joy and the hope of life. The 2
Mm.
that often choose nothing intentional around it, it's just that they get more introverted and more introspective, which is where, when we were off camera, we were talking about the idea of the women without hormones. Is it a silencing idea, and is it a way of suppressing women and that sort of stuff?
Hmm. So there's what I'm hearing there is that it's a critical time to recognize that there is a design piece to this phase.
Mm-hmm.
And if you lean into the design phase, then what happens out the other end is by your co-creation with your body's changes, rather
Yeah,
than whatever ends up happening to my body, I'll figure it out. And that's kind of
yeah,
throwing caution to the wind and hoping for the best. And
yeah.
that hoping for the best usually produces the least favorable outcome.
It's just the trickiest one for them.
Mm.
So can I walk you through something,
Yeah.
and just tell me if that's okay? So let's say we have a woman and she's before the age of 35 and she's cycling regularly and there's no change. So if we assume 35 is where things start to change, the first thing that's starting to change is the changes we were saying before about the idea of how much progesterone she has access to, and the ability of her brain to start to want to transform into the new version.
Mhm.
She goes through that progesterone period after a while. She then ovulates, doesn't ovulate, ovulates, doesn't ovulate, then goes through a phase where we all refer to it as estrogen chaos. She doesn't have the progesterone opposing it. The estrogen chaos is this phenomenal discovery point. So the estrogen chaos is where she gets to have the opportunity, and all women will have a sexual liberation phase. They'll all have a, oh my God, I didn't realize there were so many types of orgasms. Oh my God, maybe I should have an affair. Like they have all of that. And
Mm.
it's like this part of how they can stretch themselves to be the biggest versions of themselves. Like if you look at the energetics of the cervix, the cervix being the portal of transcendence and everything. All women kind of go, I'm going to transcend in my estrogen chaos. And then I'm also going to have the flip of where I don't have estrogen. And that's the lowest version of how I could feel in this and the highest version. And they kind of go up and down and up and down and up and down. And the ups and the downs and the ups and the downs start to get a bit slower. And as they're doing that, because all the receptors in the brain are changing around estrogen in particular, and her estrogen production is starting to decline, she's starting to create the version of who she wants to be as she goes through it. If she couples that estrogen chaos with something intentional, and she looks into her brain and she tries to work out who she is, what she's made of, what she wants to do with it, and has intentionality around it and support around it, it gives her the opportunity to not feel reduced as she gets to the other end of it, but rather expanded. And that's, I think, the biggest factor around it. So she can use the process of the whole journey to actually become something more, or she can just shrink as she goes through it. Most women don't want to shrink. It's just that they don't have the support or the resources to do it, or the understanding that it's possible, because they're there on their own going, no one else is feeling this and I'm just awful. But those that have the support with it, after that sort of sexual discovery part of it, it becomes the who am I made of? What am I made of? What's the extent of who I am? And who do I want to transform into? Which is where, if we go back to the beginning, if she had that high androgen PCOS picture, that androgen part of me, I'm not giving up. I'm still going to be the person that's going to fight for what it is that I want. Or that part of me that felt things so deeply and was that real watery sort of estrogen type of person, I'm not giving up on that. And then she gets the opportunity to make decisions of, do I want hormones? Do I want nutrients? Do I want herbs? Do I want, what do I want to do to be able to keep those qualities of me and evolve them to the next stage? And then if she wants to, she can theoretically take hormones and adjust the doses to go, you know what, on this period of my life, I want to have more of this, and then I want to discover more of that. But the filtering process is cellular, both brain and body, so she can literally change any part of herself that she wants.
Wow. As you were describing the estrogen chaos, my mind always turns to metaphors. And it felt like if we go in intentional, open, and in a sense of discovery, design, curiosity, it can be like a speed dating phase where you get to see all these different parts of yourself, like at an extreme. And so you get to go shopping and go, yeah, I'm going to take that with me.
You
I'm going
do.
to take that with me.
You do.
Definitely
You
not
do.
that. Yeah.
You do. You do. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And then you look at the clock and an hour has gone. That is crazy. I feel like we've gone so deep and yet also only just scratched the surface, which is pretty much every conversation we've had so far.
Pretty much.
Closing question. XX chromosome. Let's go back right to where we
back to the beginning.
started.
Yeah.
What would you love for people to lean into at any age stage? What do you think the most important gift of this XX chromosome is for us to discover for ourselves?
Flexibility and changeability. Physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally. And that women have boundless capacity of growth. Boundless. So if we distinguish between XX and XY, women will always have this phenomenal capacity for their breadth up above and all around them to consistently expand, and that no stage of life should ever be something that causes a limitation, and no stage of life should lock them into something, so that they should be able to feel that sense of, I'm going to be more than this. I'm going to be and do more than this. I'm going to expand beyond this. Women are phenomenal at this. We rewire, we recalibrate, we transmorph ourselves repeatedly. It's what we're designed to do. And so I think there's so much potential in that and so much joy in that.
The metaphor that came up there was like, we're like cyclical suffragettes.
We're pretty amazing.
We are so amazing. Thank you for just helping us dive into a couple of different aspects of why that is so, as well as always helping us navigate some of the rather intense and challenging aspects of the XX reality. You're a legend, Leah, and it's always a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you for joining me again.
Thank you so much.
I hope you loved today's show as much as I loved bringing it to you. I want to remind you that if you are someone who craves a low tox community that is judgment-free, full of empowerment, has health professionals and building health professionals that can support you, as well as me in there answering questions multiple times a week, I want to invite you to join the Low Tox Club. For the price of less than a cup of coffee a month, you have an annual membership for $49 Australian, so it's about $30 US or euro, that allows you to have a member masterclass every single month with a health professional or global expert from the podcast, where we have them to ourselves for an hour to ask questions and deep dive further. You have the beautiful supportive chat group. You have Q&As with me answering questions. We read books and talk about them, and a whole bunch more. You can head to lowtoxlife.com, hit the Explore tab, and join the club is the very first option on that list. Of course, we have over 10 evergreen courses that you can jump into anytime, whether it's navigating everyday low tox swaps with our Go Low Tox signature course, whether you have kids and you're wanting to know how to best support them with our Low Tox Kids course, whether you're planning a family and looking at a healthy low tox preconception journey, reducing inflammation, especially the chronic kind, with our Inflammation Ninja course, many other courses. You can again head to lowtoxlife.com, hit the courses tab, and you'll see all of the options, which includes a business course, my Low Tox Method program. A lot of people don't know, but I was doing a lot before starting Low Tox Life in 2009, and I was a business consultant across hospitality, health, retail, and cosmetics. I have been in business consulting for a very long time, so I absolutely adore helping people move into the low tox space or develop their low tox businesses. So that's a way I can support you. And then, of course, there's our wonderful social media communities at Low Tox Life on Instagram, and of course, the website with over 250 gluten-free recipes, blogs, downloadable PDFs to help you navigate wanting to get rid of synthetic fragrances in your school or office. I could go on. So head to lowtoxlife.com, see what takes your interest or fancy, and thank you so much for being a part of our podcast community. I love reading your reviews. I appreciate every follow and subscribe, and I want to just remind you to finish off that if there's anything you heard that you found interesting from a medical or scientific perspective, it is intended as education only. Please always chat to a health professional who knows you and your situation best. I'll see you next week. Bye.